Picture two farmers, same land, same rain, same season. The first farmer lets the rainwater fall wherever it wants. Some soaks into the ground, some runs into the road, some evaporates before noon. At harvest time, his crops are thin and dry. He worked all season and has almost nothing to show. The second farmer built 4 channels in his field before the rain came, one for drinking water, one for irrigation, one for the dry season, one for next year's seeds. Every drop of rain went exactly where it was supposed to go. Same rain, same land. At harvest time, his barn was full. The difference between those two farmers was not the weather, it was not luck, it was not talent, it was simply this. One of them decided where the water would go before it arrived. This is the story of Arthur and Grace, and the 4 envelopes that changed everything in the last chapter of their lives. Arthur was 61 years old. He had worked as a school maintenance supervisor for the same district for 27 years. He arrived early every morning. He stayed late when the work required it. He never called in sick unless he genuinely couldn't stand. Grace worked part-time at a dry cleaning shop 3 days a week. She had worked somewhere her entire adult life, a grocery store in her 20s, a school cafeteria in her 30s, various jobs through the decades, always something, always contributing. Together they had built a life, a modest one, but a real one. A small house that was almost paid off. 2 adult children who had moved out and were doing fine. By every visible measure, Arthur and Grace had made it. But retirement was 4 years away for Arthur. And the number in their savings account, the number that was supposed to carry them through the years ahead, was not the number it should have been after 27 years of work. Arthur had never told Grace the exact number, not because he was hiding it from her, but because saying it out loud would make it real in a way that the quiet dread of knowing it never quite did. He had done the math privately late at night when Grace was asleep. He had calculated what they would need to retire without depending on their children. He had compared that number to what they had. The gap between those 2 numbers was not a small miscalculation. It was 27 years of good intentions that never became actual action. He was a man who had given everything to his work. He had maintained other people's buildings for nearly 3 decades. He had never once properly maintained his own financial foundation. And at 61, with 4 years until retirement, the clock was no longer a distant concern. It was a sound he heard every morning when he woke up. It was Grace who found the letter first. It came on a Tuesday in March. A pension statement from Arthur's employer, the kind that arrives once a year and that Arthur usually filed away without reading carefully. Grace read it at the kitchen table while Arthur was at work. Then she read it again. Then she sat very still for a long time, looking out the window at the small garden they had planted together 15 years ago. When Arthur came home that evening, dinner was on the table. Grace was quiet in a way that was different from her usual quiet. She slid the letter across the table without saying anything. Arthur read it. He put it down, he picked it up and read it again. Their expected monthly pension income, the amount they would live on for the rest of their lives, was less than half of what they currently spent each month. Grace finally spoke. "Arthur, what do we do?" He had no answer. For the first time in 27 years of solving problems at work, Arthur sat at his own table and had no answer. Now here is where most couples in Arthur and Grace's position make one of 2 mistakes. They either panic and make dramatic changes they cannot sustain, or they put the letter back in the drawer and pretend they didn't read it. Arthur and Grace did neither. Because that same week, Grace found something in the back of an old recipe book that changed the conversation completely. It was a handwritten note from Grace's mother, tucked between 2 pages about casseroles and forgotten for decades. Her mother had written it in the early years of her own marriage, when money was tight and the future felt uncertain. It was a simple system, 4 envelopes written on each one in her mother's careful handwriting. What we need, what we save, what we protect, what we grow. Grace showed it to Arthur that evening. He held the old paper carefully, the way you hold something that belonged to someone who is no longer here. They decided to try it, not because they believed 4 envelopes could fix 27 years, but because they had nothing to lose and 4 years left to try. Here is what the system looked like in practice. The first envelope, what we need, received the money for every essential. Mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, medicine, transport to work, non-negotiable, untouchable. The second envelope, what we save, received a fixed amount on the day Arthur was paid, not whatever was left at the end of the month, a fixed amount removed first before anything else was touched. For the first time in 27 years, saving happened at the beginning, not the end. The third envelope, what we protect, was their emergency layer. A small amount each month, building slowly into a cushion between them and the next unexpected thing life decided to send. The fourth envelope, what we grow, was the smallest, but it existed. Money set aside not for today or even tomorrow, but for the version of their lives they were still building toward. 4 envelopes, every dollar named before it arrived. The farmer's channels built before the rain came. In the first month, Arthur and Grace saved more than they had saved in the previous 2 years combined. Not because they earned more, not because life suddenly became cheaper, but because for the first time they could see exactly where every dollar was going before it disappeared. They found $190 a month in spending that had no home, purchases that fell between the envelopes belonging to no category, serving no real purpose. $190 a month across 4 years until Arthur's retirement. That was $9,120. Not a fortune, but enough to breathe, enough to close part of the gap, enough to retire without asking their children for help. The money had always been there. It simply had nowhere to go. Something else changed that Arthur hadn't expected. The conversation about money, the one he and Grace had avoided for decades because it always ended in silence or frustration, became easier, because now there was a system to talk about instead of a failure to defend. They sat together at the kitchen table on the first of every month. 4 envelopes between them. A simple, honest conversation about where they were and where they were going. They put the 4 envelopes in a small box on top of the fridge. A visible reminder every single day that their money had a purpose now. Arthur looked at that box every morning before he left for work. Arthur and Grace did not discover a secret. They did not find a shortcut. They simply gave their money a direction before it arrived and watched what happened when every dollar finally knew where it belonged. So here is my question for you today. If you divided your next paycheck into 4 envelopes right now, what you need, what you save, what you protect, what you grow, which envelope would be hardest to fill? Drop a comment and tell me honestly. A. What I need. There is barely enough for essentials. B. What I save. Saving first feels impossible right now. C. What I protect. I have no emergency cushion at all. D. What I grow. Growth feels like a luxury I cannot afford yet. Every answer is valid. Every answer is a starting point. Subscribe, because every week, another story, another system, another way forward. I will see you in the next one.